The numbers jumped out at me like flashing red lights on a dark highway. $300,000. That's how much money had vanished from the foundation's accounts over the past year. I stared at my laptop screen, my breath caught in my chest. The spreadsheet I'd been analyzing for hours didn't just suggest theft, it shouted it. And the trail? It led straight to my mother. I'm Reagan. For as long as I can remember, I've been the responsible one. The quiet one. The one who followed the rules and stayed in the shadows while my stepsister Annabelle soaked up the spotlight. Whether it was charity galas or glamorous photo shoots, Annabelle dazzled, and Mom made sure the world knew it. Meanwhile, I buried myself in data analysis and research papers. I didn't mind, not really. I loved my work. But tonight, everything changed. Still here? Jasper's voice made me jump. He leaned against my office doorframe, his coffee mug steaming in the dim light. It's almost midnight, Reagan. Whatever you're working on can wait until morning. I shook my head, my fingers trembling as I turned the laptop toward him. Look at this, I said, my voice unsteady. The Foundation's quarterly reports don't match the bank statements. Someone's been siphoning money from the research grants. Jasper set his coffee down and leaned over my shoulder, his brow furrowing as he scanned the numbers. Are you sure about this? He asked, his tone serious. The signatures, the approval stamps, they all lead back to the Foundation's board treasurer, I said. My voice cracked. My mother. It felt surreal to say it out loud. The same woman who'd spent my entire life reminding me I wasn't as naturally gifted as Annabelle. The same woman who turned every one of my academic achievements into an excuse to talk about my stepsister's latest modeling campaign or social success. My phone buzzed on the desk. A text from Annabelle lit up the screen. Mom's going crazy planning next month's gala. Says you have to come this time. No excuses. Jasper placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. What are you going to do? I closed my laptop, my decision hardening into something I hadn't felt in years. Resolve. I'm going to that gala, I said, but not for the reasons they think. The next morning, I got to the Foundation's offices earlier than usual. The place had a sterile kind of stillness at that hour, just the faint hum of air conditioning and the soft shuffle of Sarah, my mother's assistant, organizing the day's schedule. Reagan, what brings you to the administrative floor so early? Sarah asked, her smile warm and genuine. She'd always been kind to me, even when my mother's icy professionalism set the tone for everyone else. Just dropping off some research proposals, I lied smoothly, holding up a folder as my cover. Is my mother in? She's meeting with Trevor, Sarah said. Her voice dropped into that overly polite tone people use when they want to gossip, but won't dare say too much. Annabelle's fiancé. Something about sponsorships for the gala. Perfect. I made my way to my mother's office, my heart pounding like it had a mind of its own. The room was empty, her desk spotless and intimidating, as always. With shaky hands, I pulled a USB drive from my pocket and plugged it into her computer. The encryption software I'd prepared the night before would grant me remote access to her files. It was a small gamble, but a necessary one. I barely managed to log out and step away before Sarah appeared in the doorway. Reagan, can I help you with something? Nope, I said, forcing a smile. Just dropped off my paperwork. Thanks, Sarah. Later that afternoon, Jasper and I sat in his lab, hunched over my laptop as we combed through the files I'd downloaded. My stomach churned with every new discovery. Here, Jasper said, pointing to an email chain. Look at this. Your mom's been in correspondence with Trevor's investment firm. They're using the gala to launder money through fake charitable donations. Of course they are, I muttered, bitter. My mother, the master manipulator, and Trevor, her perfect partner in crime. Meanwhile, Annabelle's out there playing the golden child, completely unaware she's the perfect cover for all of this. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. It wasn't Annabelle's fault she was our mother's favorite. And yet, the resentment I thought I'd buried years ago clawed its way to the surface. My phone buzzed. This time, it was my mother. Darling, don't forget Annabelle's dress fitting tomorrow. She's chosen the most stunning gown for the gala, and we simply must find you something appropriate. I could practically hear the unspoken subtext. Appropriate, meaning bland and forgettable. Nothing that would steal Annabelle's thunder. I exhaled sharply and put my phone down. I'm tired of this, I told Jasper. Tired of playing the quiet one, the good daughter who never rocks the boat. They've crossed a line. So what's the plan? He asked. I pulled up the gala's guest list on my screen. Board members, major donors, reporters. The perfect audience, I said, my voice growing steadier. Mother always taught us that presentation is everything. Time to show her just how right she was. Jasper's eyes widened as he pieced it together. Reagan, if you go through with this, it could destroy your family. They destroyed themselves, I said, thinking of the researchers waiting for funding that would never come, and the patients who'd been let down because of my mother's greed. And if I don't do this, they'll keep getting away with it. This is bigger than family now. For the first time in days, I felt a strange kind of calm settle over me. The gala was in 3 weeks. That was just enough time to make sure every detail was perfect. If my mother had taught me anything, it was how to be meticulous. Now, I'd use that lesson against her. The week leading up to the gala was a blur of late nights, spreadsheets, and coffee. Every time I thought I'd uncovered the worst of it, Jasper found something new buried in the files. Offshore accounts, fake charities, and doctored grant approvals. My mother's schemes were more intricate than I'd imagined. She's clever, Jasper said one night as we spread out printouts across my desk, but she made one mistake. What's that? I asked, barely looking up from an email thread connecting Trevor to a suspicious shell company. She got greedy, he said, sliding a highlighted report toward me. These donation records? $500,000 from a company that doesn't even exist. Before I could respond, a knock at my office door made us both freeze. Annabelle stood there, perfectly composed in her designer outfit, holding a paper bag. Surprise, she said, smiling. I brought lunch. I slammed my laptop shut while Jasper casually gathered the papers into a folder. Annabelle set the bag down on my desk and tilted her head. Am I interrupting something? You two look like teenagers caught making out behind the bleachers. Just boring research stuff, I said quickly. What brings you here? Can't a sister bring lunch without an ulterior motive? She teased, perching on the edge of my desk. Although, she sighed, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming against the wood. Mother's driving me crazy with all this gala planning. I needed a break. Jasper stood abruptly. I should get back to the lab. He gave me a quick nod and left, leaving me alone with Annabelle. She leaned back, letting out a small laugh. Trevor's been acting weird lately, secretive, always on the phone with Mother. It's like they're planning something they don't want me to know about. My heart skipped a beat. I'm sure it's just last-minute gala stuff, I said, trying to sound casual. She shrugged, her smile faltering. Maybe. Sometimes I feel like I'm just a prop in their perfect little world, you know? She laughed again, but this time it sounded forced. Anyway, enough about me. Enjoy your lunch. She left before I could respond, but her words stuck with me. For the first time, I saw her not as the golden child, but as someone who might be just as trapped in our mother's web as I was. That night, I met Jasper at a cafe near campus. He slid a USB drive across the table, his expression grim. I traced the shell companies, he said. They all lead back to Trevor's firm. But here's the kicker. The money's being routed through offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Classic, I muttered, taking a sip of my coffee. But why? My mother's salary is more than enough to fund her lifestyle. It's not just about stealing from the foundation, Jasper said, lowering his voice. They're setting up something called Project Legacy. It's all over her emails with Trevor. Project Legacy? I frowned. What is it? From what I can piece together, it's a plan to restructure the foundation, he explained. They want to redirect all research funding to approved projects. He used air quotes, his tone bitter, meaning projects that funnel money back to them. I felt sick. They're not just stealing from existing grants. They're creating a pipeline to steal even more, and Annabelle has no idea, Jasper finished. At that moment, the cafe door opened, and my stomach dropped. Trevor walked in, followed closely by my mother. We ducked behind our menus, but they didn't notice us. They sat at a table near enough that snippets of their conversation drifted over. "The announcement will be perfect," my mother was saying. "Annabelle on stage, presenting our vision for the foundation's future. The board won't know what hit them." Trevor smirked. "And the old guard will fall in line once the donations start rolling in." I clenched my fists under the table, my nails digging into my palms. They were going to use Annabelle as the face of their scheme, making her an unwitting accomplice in their corruption. Back in my office, I pored over the gala preparations folder. My mother had already scripted every detail: the speeches, the photo ops, even the exact moment Annabelle would announce Project Legacy. "We can't let this happen," I told Jasper over the phone that evening. "They're trying to legitimize their theft, and they're using Annabelle to do it." "What's our next move?" he asked. I stared at the gala invitation on my desk, Annabelle's smiling face front and center. "We talked to Sarah. She handles all the foundation's correspondence. If anyone's seen something, it's her." "That's risky," Jasper said. "She's basically your mother's right hand." "Maybe," I said, picking up the invitation. "But Sarah believes in what the foundation is supposed to stand for, and some things are worth the risk." The next day, Sarah handed me a stack of documents, her hands trembling. "I always knew something wasn't right," she whispered. "But this..." She glanced nervously at my mother's office across the hall. "If she finds out I showed you these..." "She won't," I promised, quickly photographing each page with my phone. "You're doing the right thing." Her eyes darted to the door as voices echoed from the corridor. "Go. Now." I slipped out just as Trevor's voice reached me. "Paula, we need to discuss the announcement." I ducked into the stairwell, pressing myself against the wall as their conversation faded. My heart pounded in my chest, but my resolve only grew stronger. This wasn't just about exposing corruption anymore. It was about setting things right. By the time I got back to my office, I was running on adrenaline and pure spite. The documents Sarah had shared painted a damning picture. My mother had been doctoring board meeting minutes for months, rewriting history to cover her tracks. It was worse than I imagined. This wasn't just embezzlement. It was a complete betrayal of everything the foundation was supposed to stand for. "Jasper, we've got it," I said, as I connected my phone to his computer. "Sarah's documents fill in the gaps. This is everything we need to blow it wide open." Jasper scrolled through the photos, his eyes widening. "This is massive, Reagan. With this, we can prove everything. The shell companies, the offshore accounts, the falsified grants. It's all here." Before we could celebrate, the lab door burst open. Annabelle stood there, mascara streaked down her cheeks, looking more disheveled than I'd ever seen her. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice breaking. Jasper and I exchanged a look. How much had she heard? "Trevor's cheating on me," she blurted out. Not what I was expecting. "What?" I said, stunned. "How do you know?" "I found messages on his phone." Her voice shook, and she collapsed into a chair. "But it's worse than that. He's been meeting with Mother almost every day, planning something big, something about the foundation." I hesitated, then asked carefully, "What do you know about Project Legacy?" Her perfectly plucked brows furrowed. "It's the new initiative Mother says I'm supposed to announce at the gala. Some kind of restructuring to make the foundation more efficient." "Why?" I glanced at Jasper, who gave me a subtle nod. "Because it's a lie," I said. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. "The whole thing is a front for embezzlement. Mother and Trevor have been stealing from the research grants, and they're planning to use you to make it all look legitimate." Annabelle stared at me, her face shifting from disbelief to horror to anger. "All those meetings," she said slowly. "All those times they said they were planning the gala together. They were planning this? They were going to make you the face of their scheme. Jasper added gently. Annabelle stood abruptly, pacing the room. I always knew Mother was controlling, but this? Using me to steal from sick people? She whirled to face me. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Would you have believed me? I asked quietly. She stopped pacing, her shoulders slumping. No, she admitted, her laugh bitter. Probably not. God, I've been so stupid. The perfect daughter, doing exactly what she's told. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Your mother's looking for the original meeting minutes. She knows something's wrong. We need to move fast, I told Annabelle. Mother suspects something. What are you going to do? She twisted her engagement ring around her finger, then slid it off and set it on Jasper's desk with a decisive clink. Count me in, she said, her voice steel. Nobody uses me as a prop in their corruption scheme. Not even Mother. Over the next few days, Annabelle proved to be a surprisingly good partner. She knew all of our mother's passwords. Years of being the golden child had given her a front-row seat to the inner workings of the foundation. Together, we combed through emails, bank records, and internal memos, gathering enough evidence to make sure no one could wiggle out of this. This email's a smoking gun, Jasper said one night, pulling up a message from Mother to the IT department. She's ordered them to wipe certain servers the day before the gala. She's covering her tracks. We need to get everything we can before she does, I said, already typing furiously. Annabelle grinned, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Lucky for us, she made me memorize all her access codes, just in case. With her help, we cracked into the Foundation's backup servers and found more than we bargained for. The real proposal for Project Legacy wasn't just a charitable initiative. It was a carefully crafted plan to funnel millions into private investments under the guise of restructuring. She's been planning this for years, Annabelle whispered, reading over my shoulder. And Trevor's firm isn't just managing the money, Jasper said grimly. They're creating fake research projects to justify the funding transfers. Before we could process the weight of it all, Annabelle's phone buzzed. It was Trevor. He wants to meet, she said, her expression wary. Good, I said. Let him think you're still on his side. The longer he stays in the dark, the better. Annabelle hesitated, then nodded. If this goes sideways... It won't, I interrupted. We've come too far to stop now. The tension escalated when Mother called an emergency board meeting 3 days before the gala. She's panicking, Sarah whispered over the phone. She's convinced there's a leak, and she's putting everything on lockdown. That's not going to stop us, I said. That evening, Annabelle, Jasper, and I gathered at my apartment to finalize our plan. Sarah had left copies of the files at our usual drop-off point, and we pored over every detail, double-checking our evidence. Mother's moving the announcement to a private preview event tomorrow night, Annabelle said, scrolling through her messages. No press, just key stakeholders and family. She doesn't trust anyone anymore. Jasper shook his head. She's trying to get ahead of us. She's desperate, I said. And desperate people make mistakes. Annabelle looked at me, her eyes sharp. Then let's make sure this one is her last. The next night, I found myself standing in the Foundation's event space, dressed in a sleek black gown I barely remembered picking out. The preview event was smaller than the gala would be, but the stakes felt just as high. My mother, radiant in a midnight blue dress, floated through the room like she owned it, which of course she did. Stop fidgeting, she hissed at Trevor as they stood near the podium. And for heaven's sake, fix your tie. You're supposed to look confident. I lingered near the back, clutching my clutch tighter than necessary. The USB drive hidden inside felt heavier than it should. Across the room, Annabelle mingled effortlessly with board members and donors, her emerald green dress catching the light. She looked poised, composed. But when our eyes met, I saw the storm brewing behind her calm exterior. Ready? Jasper's voice came through my earpiece, barely above a whisper. He was stationed in the AV booth, pretending to adjust sound levels. Ready? I murmured, glancing toward my mother as she climbed onto the stage, commanding everyone's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice warm and inviting. "Thank you for joining us on such short notice. Tonight marks a new chapter for the Horton Foundation, one that promises growth, innovation, and, most importantly, a legacy of hope." I slipped away toward the AV booth as she continued, my heart thundering in my chest. Inside, Jasper was hunched over the control panel. "Everything's live," he whispered, nodding toward the screen. "The cameras are rolling, and Sarah's broadcasting the stream to every board member. Even if they cut the power, it's all being recorded to external servers." "And the emails?" I asked. "They've all been sent," he confirmed. "Every board member, every donor, every major news outlet, they all have the evidence." Back on stage, my mother gestured for Annabelle to join her. "And now, it's my pleasure to introduce the future of the Horton Foundation, my daughter Annabelle, who will share our vision for Project Legacy." Annabelle stepped onto the stage, looking every inch the polished socialite. The room erupted into polite applause as she took the microphone. "Thank you, Mother," she began, her voice clear and steady. "And thank you to everyone here tonight. Before I begin, I'd like to share something personal." I saw my mother's smile falter ever so slightly. This wasn't part of the script. "All my life, I've been the face of this foundation," Annabelle continued. "The perfect daughter, the charitable socialite, the cover story. But tonight, I've decided to be something else. Honest." The room fell silent. I caught Trevor's eyes narrowing as he stepped closer to the stage. My mother stiffened, her smile freezing in place. Jasper clicked a button on the control panel, and the screens behind Annabelle came to life. Financial records, email chains, and bank transfers filled the screens, each one more damning than the last. "Project Legacy isn't about charity," Annabelle said, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. "It's about greed, corruption, stealing from the sick and desperate to line private pockets." "That's enough," my mother snapped, her voice sharp. "Security!" But there were no security guards, not hers anyway. Sarah had made sure the real police were already in the building. I stepped onto the stage beside Annabelle, my heart pounding. "The evidence has already been sent to the FBI," I said, meeting my mother's furious gaze. "And the press. Sarah's broadcasting this live." The room erupted into chaos. Board members leaped from their seats, donors scrambled to check their phones, and reporters began snapping photos and recording the scene. Trevor made a beeline for the AV booth, but Jasper had locked the door. "You ungrateful little—" My mother lunged for the microphone, but Annabelle stood her ground. $300,000 from the Cancer Research Fund, Annabelle read from the screen. $500,000 from pediatric studies, all funneled through Trevor's firm into private accounts. "You have no idea what you're doing," my mother snarled, her composure crumbling. "The people we answer to will all be investigated," I said, cutting her off. "Every shell company, every fake grant, every donor complicit in stealing from sick children." Trevor finally reached the stage, grabbing my mother's arm. "Paula, we need to leave. Now." But she wasn't done. She grabbed the microphone, her voice desperate. "Everything I did was for this foundation, for our family's legacy." "No," Annabelle said, her voice cold and steady. "It was for you, always for you. You used me as your perfect distraction while you robbed the people we promised to help." The sound of footsteps echoed through the room as police officers entered, their badges gleaming under the stage lights. "Paula Horton," an officer said, stepping forward. "We need you to come with us." My mother's gaze shifted to me, her eyes full of venom. "I gave you everything," she hissed as they led her away. "Both of you. And this is how you repay me?" "You taught us well," I said, my voice steady. "But you forgot one thing. Sometimes the student surpasses the teacher." The morning after the preview event felt surreal. I'd barely slept, running on adrenaline and the echoes of last night's chaos. The news had exploded overnight. Philanthropic powerhouse exposed in massive embezzlement scandal. Pictures of my mother being led away in handcuffs were splashed across every outlet. Reporters camped outside my apartment, their cameras flashing every time someone passed my door. At the foundation's offices, the boardroom was in shambles, papers scattered, board members arguing over damage control. Sarah, looking pale but determined, met me at the elevator. "They've been in there since dawn," she whispered. "It's bad." I nodded, stepping into the room with Annabelle right behind me. The board fell silent, their eyes heavy with judgment and exhaustion. The chairman, an elderly man who had known my father, cleared his throat. "Ladies, please sit." He shuffled a stack of papers. The extent of this scandal, it's staggering. The foundation's reputation, our donor relationships, it's all at risk. "Not if we act fast," I said, opening my laptop. "Transparency is the only way forward. We need to release a full account of what happened, every dollar stolen, every fraudulent act, and we need to show exactly how we're going to fix it." One of the board members, a woman with sharp eyes, frowned. "And who's going to lead this recovery? The press is calling it the legacy scandal. Donors are fleeing." Annabelle leaned forward, her voice calm but resolute. "Let me talk to them. I've been the face of this foundation for years. I can show them we're taking responsibility, that we exposed the corruption ourselves because it was the right thing to do. And I've drafted a restructuring plan," I added, sliding a proposal across the table. "New oversight measures, transparent accounting, direct links between donors and the research they fund. We can turn this around." The chairman exchanged glances with the others, then nodded slowly. "We need new leadership. Reagan, Annabelle, we'd like to offer you both positions. Reagan, as Executive Director of Research, and Annabelle, as Director of Public and Donor Relations. Together." Annabelle and I exchanged a look. For the first time in years, I saw something I hadn't expected in her eyes. Trust. "Together," she said. Later that afternoon, I stood in front of the building with Annabelle as reporters swarmed us again. The cameras clicked rapidly, their lenses fixed on us like vultures circling prey. "Miss Horton," one shouted, "how does it feel to expose your own mother's corruption?" I met the question head-on. This wasn't about family, it was about doing the right thing. No one is above accountability, not even family. "And the foundation?" another asked. "Can it recover?" Annabelle stepped forward, her polished demeanor unshaken. "Every dollar stolen will be repaid, threefold. That's our promise. The Horton Foundation is entering a new era of transparency and genuine charitable work." From the corner of my eye, I saw Trevor being escorted out of a federal building in handcuffs. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his face pale and drawn. A reporter called out to Annabelle, "Do you have a comment on your ex-fiancé's arrest?" Her composure cracked for a moment, but then she straightened. "The foundation's future isn't about the past," she said firmly. "It's about saving lives, funding breakthroughs, and keeping promises. That's the only story that matters now." Jasper's car pulled up to the curb, and we slid into the back seat as the reporters shouted more questions. The moment the doors closed, Annabelle exhaled shakily. "I loved him," she whispered, staring out the window. "Or I thought I did. How did we not see who they really were?" "We saw what they wanted us to see," I said softly. "Just like everyone else." The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, press conferences, and late nights. Annabelle and I worked side by side to rebuild the foundation from the ground up. Glass walls replaced the old ones in the office, letting sunlight flood the halls. Real-time donation tracking systems were installed, giving donors full visibility into how their money was being used. At the trial, my mother sat straight-backed and unrepentant as the judge read the verdict. Guilty on all counts. She didn't look at us as they led her away. Trevor, having taken a plea deal, had already been sentenced. The fallout was immense, but for the first time in years, the foundation felt lighter, freer. After the trial, Sarah arranged an all-staff meeting. The boardroom was packed, every chair filled with researchers, administrators, and grant coordinators. Annabelle stood at the head of the table, her usual polished exterior replaced with something raw and sincere. "The trial is over," she said, her voice steady. "Now we focus on what matters, the work. A researcher raised his hand. What about the pediatric research study? They need funding. Approved, I said without hesitation, along with the stem cell initiative and the rare disease project. But the budget? The budget is solid, Annabelle cut in. Every donation is now tracked in real time. No more missing money, no more secrets. As the meeting broke up, Jasper found me in my office, holding a thick envelope. You haven't opened it yet? He asked, nodding toward the desk. It was a letter from my mother, written before her sentencing. I picked it up reluctantly and read her familiar, precise handwriting. Reagan, you think you've won. But everything I did was to secure our position, our influence. You'll understand someday, power requires sacrifice. Remember that. Mother. I crumpled the letter, tossing it into the shredder. Annabelle appeared in the doorway, watching silently. She's still trying to justify herself, I said. She'll never change, Annabelle replied. But we did. Weeks later, the governor toured the foundation. He marveled at the changes, the glass walls, the digital displays showing real-time research progress. Impressive, he said, gesturing at the screens. Very modern. But what about the political connections your mother cultivated? Annabelle stepped forward, her voice smooth as silk. Those connections ended with the old regime, but we'd love to show you how your state's grants are advancing critical research. I hid a smile. Mother had taught us well about handling powerful people, just not in the way she intended. That evening, Jasper handed me the latest results from the pediatric trials. This could change everything, he said, his excitement contagious. We might have a breakthrough within months. This is what the foundation was supposed to be, I murmured. Annabelle placed a hand on my shoulder. And this time, it will be. We stepped outside together, the city lights reflecting on the foundation's new logo. Two sisters standing shoulder to shoulder, no longer trapped in anyone's shadow. Do you know what Mother never understood? Annabelle said. What's that? I asked. Real power isn't about control. It's about choice. And we choose to help people. I smiled, looking up at the night sky. This time, we're building something real. Story 2. During summer vacation, I traveled up to my folks' place on a balmy July evening. These visits had become a recurring theme after 3 years of college. Mom's overzealous embraces, Dad's uncomfortable backpats, and incessant inquiries about my academic pursuits never fully concealed their lack of interest. Honey? Maya? From the porch, Mom called. Dinner is almost around the corner. Additionally, guess who is coming over? I didn't have to speculate. As if they needed to remind everyone of their success, my older sister Jennifer and her husband Tom had developed the practice of stopping by whenever I was at home. As expected, we were all seated around the dining table 2 hours later. Mom had taken out her tablecloth for the momentous occasion. Only during Jennifer's visit did the one with the beautiful lace trim see daylight. Using the dramatic flair she had developed over the years, Jennifer proclaimed this while putting down her fork. Tom and I had been considering spending Christmas together in Hawaii. Like a happy schoolgirl, Mom practically clapped her hands. Yes, it would be fantastic. Dad grinned proudly. What a wonderful thought, my love. Then, with that recognizable sarcastic grin on her lips, Jennifer turned to face me. Do you believe you can afford it, Maya? Or ought your big sister to assist you? I held my child firm even though my cheeks burned. I am able to control my own spending. Regards. Are you certain? Jennifer's eyebrow went up. Since the estimated cost of airfare and lodging is $3,000 per person, my water nearly swallowed me. $3,000. That exceeded the sum of my savings. Additionally, the minimum wage was all I was earning from my part-time work, but I'd rather not take Jennifer's kindness than spend the next 6 months eating ramen. I'll manage, I responded. I reiterated forcefully. Jennifer turned back to our parents with a shrug. In any case, the restaurant is doing fantastically. We recently brought on an Italian sous chef. Is it not unbelievable? Here in our town, we have real Italian food. Dear Mom, Maya said, you're so entrepreneurial. It would be wise for you to learn about business savvy from your sister. Indeed, Maya. Jennifer added her voice. One day, you could even be able to work for me. I felt 10 years old again as I sat at the dinner table and watched my parents becoming enamored with Jennifer's plans for Hawaii. There had been no change. The same happy look on Dad's face, the same eager nods for Mom, the same sense of invisibility. As she had been since we were little, Jennifer remained their golden child. Given the impact it had on our parents' perceptions of us, the 5 years that separated us may as well have been 50. Although they never explicitly stated it, their deeds spoke louder than words. The person they trusted was Jennifer. The one who would succeed, they were certain. Hey, do you recall Jennifer's victory in the 10th grade school business competition? Dad used to reminisce much. We were immediately aware of her business energy. They weren't mean about it, which is funny. They never intentionally denigrated or injured me. They simply didn't remember me, occasionally, as if I were a guest star on the Jennifer show. They would remember to inquire about my needs or grades. However, their gaze kept returning to Jennifer as they awaited her next triumph to rejoice over. I'm grateful for Grandpa Joe. That large old house with the creaking swing and the wraparound porch was his home. The only one who seemed to care enough about us both was him. He was a prosperous businessman who made a commitment early on to cover the cost of both of our college educations. I was 13 when Jennifer went off to college. I hoped that would change. I would finally get the opportunity to be the daughter in the spotlight. I was mistaken, boy. Jennifer just gave me a call. Mom would virtually vibrate with delight as she rushed into my room. She has joined the team that debates. This weekend, we ought to make the trip up to visit Jennifer. A breakfast would be suggested by Dad. We can give her some cash to cover her bills. The laptop would sit on the kitchen counter as they prepared supper, and they would spend hours on Skype with her. Even without Jennifer, her voice could be heard throughout our home. I would sneak out the back door and go to my grandfather's house in the interim. Grandpa's afternoons become a haven for me. My real house never seemed as much like home as our small routine did. With a container of mint chocolate chip ice cream between us, we would curl up on his faded leather couch and watch old movies on his antiquated television. What's so wonderful about Casablanca? Maya, he would say, halting the film. The obvious hero isn't the point. It's about the silent person who acts morally while no one else is around. On other days, we would play chess, and Dad would tell me stories about his own upbringing as we ordered a pepperoni pizza. He took me to the lake behind his house on the weekends to teach me how to fish. He would remark that the problem with fishing is that he assisted me in baiting my hook. The greatest fish aren't usually the ones who create the most noise. The greatest memorable moments can occasionally be found in the quiet ones that go deep. I used to think that perhaps, just possibly, I didn't have to be the favorite to be loved while I sat in his tiny fishing boat and watched the sun shimmer on the sea. Without making a huge deal out of it, Grandpa had a knack of making me feel noticed. Do you want to rewatch Roman Holiday? After a hard day of fishing, he would inquire. I purchased those chocolate biscuits that you enjoy. Unlike Jennifer's accomplishments, such moments weren't ostentatious or dazzling. They were genuine, uncomplicated, and silent. When my parents were transporting spending money to Jennifer over state lines, Grandpa was teaching me how to play poker with Mrs. Chips. 5 years flew by, filled with accomplishments and family feasts. Of course, all of Jennifer's. She earned an honors degree from college, got a position at a big company, and began dating Tom, whom my parents said was the one for her right away. I was getting ready for my own college experience in the meanwhile. Grandpa gave me the tightest embrace he had ever given me on the day I departed for college. Something about his hug felt different, more definitive, more intense. He murmured in my ear, "Maya, I love you so much. Remember that, always." At the time, I dismissed it with a laugh. "You're behaving as though we won't ever see one another again, Grandpa. I'll spend Thanksgiving at home." He simply touched my face with that soft smile of his. "Kiddo, just keep in mind what I stated. Mom contacted me 2 months into my freshman year. When she told me that Grandpa had passed away while he was sleeping, her voice was cracking. The globe momentarily ceased to revolve. Unable to comprehend the words, I sat in my dorm room with my bed phone glued to my ear. The day following the service, the funeral took place on a clear day. For the will reading, we all assembled at Grandpa's lawyer's office. I was fidgeting in the scratchy department shop as Jennifer sat primly in her expensive black outfit. I purchased one for my daughter Sarah at the last minute, the lawyer read. I leave you $50,000. Mom squeezed Dad's hand and nodded. I will $300,000 to Jennifer, my granddaughter. Jennifer's expression brightened. She turned to face Tom right away, who had been watching her during the burial. We still have enough money to open our restaurant so we can have that ideal wedding right now, baby. And to Maya, my granddaughter, the lawyer went on. I give up my Maple Street home, everything in it, and the land around it. After a little period of silence, Jennifer started giggling. Maya got the ancient house. Oh my God, it's funny. She wiped her eyes from laughter. Sis, don't worry. Perhaps you could sell it and get a wonderful present for yourself, but I don't think anyone would desire that ancient, groaning building. Mom gave Jennifer a mild reprimand, but she was already grinning at her older daughter's ideas. Jennifer took over the solemn moment and declared, We'll have the wedding in spring. I already have the ideal business strategy for a real Italian restaurant with Tom. This is precisely the amount of money we required. As promised, Jennifer poured herself into the wedding preparations. It was an amazing event. A 5-tier cake, ice sculptures, white doves, and what seemed like half the town were there. I watched her marry Tom, and what my mother referred to as the social event of the season, while wearing a bridesmaid dress she had selected. Even the tan had faded before the honeymoon. Tom and Jennifer started their eatery. It was dubbed Bella Vita, Lovely Life. In an article about them, the local newspaper commended the young business people for introducing real Italian food to our tiny community. The article was framed and displayed in the living room by Mom and Dad. I attempted to decide what to do with my inheritance in the interim. It wouldn't be cheap to maintain that large old house, and the property taxes weren't negligible. One weekend, after doing the math, I believed I had figured out the answer. At the upcoming family meal, I made the decision to mention it. As I pushed my green beans around the plate, I tried to sound confident by saying, I've been thinking about the house. I could rent it out because I spend the majority of the year at college. That would assist in paying for the upkeep and taxes. I looked up at the ensuing silence. Jennifer and Mom were sharing one of those glances that, as a child, had always been a sign of trouble. Suddenly, Tom, Jennifer's husband, showed a keen interest in his mashed potatoes. Mom said, Oh, honey, in that condescending tone she saved for when she felt I was being especially naive. When your sister and Tom need a place to live, why would you want to rent to strangers? I blinked. What? Jennifer clinked delicately and put down her wine glass. Don't you think it makes perfect sense? The extra room would be helpful to Tom and me, particularly now that we are in charge of the eatery. It goes without saying that you won't charge your own sister rent. That would be absurd, wouldn't it, Mother? It would, of course. Mom agreed immediately. Family helps. Family. And just like that. They turned back to their previous conversation about the restaurant's new wine list. Dad nodded along. Jennifer gestured animatedly about some expensive candy she'd imported, and Tom finally looked up from his potatoes to join in. I sat there, fork suspended halfway to my mouth as the reality of what had just happened sank in. I could protest, of course. I could point out that it was my house, my inheritance, my decision. I could remind them that Jennifer and Tom had just gotten a huge sum of money from Grandpa's. Well, while I got, apparently nothing now, but I knew it wouldn't make any difference. They'd look at me with that mixture of disappointment and annoyance they always did when I didn't go along with their plans. Mom would sigh and remind me about family loyalty. Jennifer would make subtle jabs about my selfishness for weeks. Dad would give me that look. The one that said I was making things difficult for no good reason. So I did what I'd always done. I swallowed my protests along with my now called green beans and stayed quiet. The next weekend, Jennifer and Tom moved into my house. She sent me pictures of how they were updating the place. Grandpa's old leather chair replaced by some modern monstrosity. His beloved fishing photos taken down to make room for framed reviews of their restaurant. While I studied for midterms in my cramped dorm room, my sister and her husband lived rent-free in my house every time I came home for breaks. I had to ask permission to visit what was legally my own property. Let's get back to the present. After that summer dinner, I threw myself into work with renewed determination. Between morning shifts at the campus cafe and evening hours at the study library, I barely had time to breathe. But every time I felt like giving up, I'd think about Hawaii and push myself to pick up an extra shift. When Jennifer called in late November, I had the money ready. $3,000, nearly every penny I'd earned over the past few months. "Send it today," she instructed. "I need to finalize the bookings." I transferred the money immediately, my hands shaking with excitement as I clicked send on the banking app. That weekend, I treated myself to a new swimsuit. Nothing fancy, just a simple blue one-piece on sale. My friend Lisa let me borrow her good suitcase, the one with the wheels that actually worked. December 23rd arrived crisp and cold. I showed up at my parents' house with my borrowed suitcase and new swimsuit, practically buzzing with excitement. But something felt off. Mom barely met my eyes when she hugged me, and Dad kept clearing his throat the way he did when he was uncomfortable. Then Jennifer and Tom arrived. The moment they walked in, I knew something was wrong. Jennifer had that look on her face, the same one she'd worn when she told me she'd be living in my house rent-free. Mom and Jennifer exchanged glances that made my stomach twist. We sat down to dinner, and for a few minutes there was only the sound of forks against plates. Then Jennifer set down her wine glass and cleared her throat. "We need to discuss something," she announced. "The restaurant? Well, we've hit a rough patch. The figures aren't what we projected." Mom reached over and squeezed her hand supportively. I observed she already knew what was coming. "We've had to make some painful decisions," Jennifer said, her voice dripping with phony remorse. "We've had to trim certain costs, including our contribution to the Hawaii vacation budget." My fork froze halfway to my lips, so she carried on, waving between herself, Tom, and our parents. "We've all discussed it, and we think the best answer is for Maya to sit this one out." The room was whirling, but I already paid my portion. I managed to say yes. "Well?" Jennifer grinned, that condescending smile I knew so well. Story 4. I find out that in order to pay for her sister's wedding present, my girlfriend surreptitiously listed my PS5 for sale. I ended it and broke up with her. I'm a man of 27 years old. I've been balancing job commitments and family responsibilities over the previous several weeks, so I hardly had time for my regular gaming sessions. The centerpiece of my entertainment area, my PlayStation 5, was sitting there collecting dust. My partner and I usually had an unwritten regard for one another's belongings, so I never thought anything was wrong. She would make fun of me for playing video games too much, but I never thought she was planning something so illegal. When I heard the doorbell one Saturday afternoon, everything changed. A stranger was standing on the porch, checking his cell phone, when I peered out the window because I wasn't expecting anyone. While searching through drawers in the kitchen, my girlfriend happened to be there. When the doorbell rang, she appeared surprised but dismissed it, adding, "I'll see who it is." There was a spark of stress in her features. I followed her to the door out of curiosity. The stranger said, "Hey, I'm here about the PlayStation 5 you posted," as she opened it. My ears pricked up, which felt strange right away. There was no way I was going to sell my S5. My girlfriend stumbled. "Oh, I should have messaged you. The plans have changed a little." She gave me a sidelong glance, obviously hoping I wouldn't butt in, but I took a step forward. "Is there a PlayStation 5 sale going on here?" As he browsed through something on his phone, the customer frowned and appeared perplexed. "This is the site, isn't it?" I was informed that it was still available and that I should come by today. He held up the screen to me. An advertisement on Facebook Marketplace included pictures of a 5 that oddly resembled mine. Even a picture of my living room and TV stand was included in the piece. My girlfriend's cheeks flushed. "I'll take care of this," she said as she attempted to push me away. "Simply move to the opposite room." But I didn't back down. I apologized to the buyer. "There must be a miscommunication. You can't buy the console." The man sighed because he had driven a long way, appearing irritated. He inquired whether I knew the listing was for half the asking price or if I was the seller. My girlfriend attempted to patch things up by saying that I never verified the sale. All I was doing was accepting offers. As the door closed, the buyer, looking frustrated, threw up his hands and walked away, complaining about time lost. I looked at my girlfriend. My pulse raced with a mixture of surprise and rage. How come my 5 are up for sale on the internet? She assumed a defensive stance at first. It's not really important. It's been weeks since you used it. You wouldn't miss it, I thought. That wasn't an excuse at all. I raised my voice. I spent a lot of money on that console, you know. And it's mine, even if it's now gathering dust. You must inquire before selling my property. She then revealed the true cause, or a portion of it, anyhow. It seems that her sister had her sights set on a high-end present for her upcoming wedding. A high-end honeymoon fund, or a luxury set. In order to pay for that lavish gift, my girlfriend intended to sell my 5. We are supposed to bring something spectacular. I said, she said. Additionally, I don't currently have the money. If it's for family, I was confident you'd understand. I gaped at her in shock. Selling my console behind my back is your answer. That is so twisted up that you don't notice it. She said that she was only attempting to be kind to her sister. The entitlement followed. There's always another one to buy. You're not quite broke. My sister's wedding, however, is a once-in-a-lifetime event. The reasoning was astounding. In private, she listed my gadget for sale. Expected me to comply with their agreement to meet a buyer at our residence. I insisted on answers. Why don't you ask me first? Is it worth listing behind my back? Irritated by my rage, she folded her arms. Since you would have refused, your gaming toy is only a luxury, and this wedding is significant. That comment really hit home how she feels about my interests. Disposable, insignificant, not worth talking about. It made my blood boil. If she believed it was okay to sell my belongings in secret, I informed her, I wasn't sure I could trust her anymore. She gave an eye roll, spouting lines as though you don't even utilize them. Additionally, I'm doing this out of duty to my family. I was furious in the living room when she hurried straight to the bedroom. It was unbelievable. I had never seen her like that. Her sister's wedding present trumped any regard for my property because of her inflated feeling of entitlement. A feeling of treachery crept in. After more than a year of dating, I believed we were aware of one another's limits. Obviously, I was mistaken. I paced the whole evening, partially hoping the buyer would return so I could vent my annoyance once more. However, the harm had already been done. For a brief period, my console felt secure, but my relationship felt everything but. When I woke up the following morning, she was going through her phone while drinking coffee. I insisted that we actually discuss what transpired. I have things to run, she said, trying to dismiss me. Later, let's do this. I demanded that we speak now. As she grudgingly made her imprint, the tension in the room was high. I started, I want a straight answer. Did you really think that selling my guy for a wedding present was acceptable? She gave me a look that suggested I was exaggerating. She said, You're exaggerating the situation. I wasn't exactly stealing. All I was doing was reallocating resources to a more worthy purpose. I cringed at the words, rearranging assets. My belongings weren't only arbitrary assets to be exchanged for her family's wishes. She then attempted a guilt trip strategy. The wedding of my sister is significant. I can't just show up with anything inexpensive since she's done so much for me in my life. In any case, you have been ignoring that console. I assumed you would comprehend. Her reasoning was astounding. I didn't let her rephrase it, so I continued. No, you didn't inquire. You organized a buyer in secret, posted it, and only got discovered when the buyer arrived when I was home. That is not a request for assistance. Betrayal is what that is. I have no other way to raise money, she sighed in frustration. A little personal loan would not be granted to her. She didn't want to skimp on a gift and wouldn't ask her parents. I want to give my sister something that she will treasure. She sneered and pointed at my TV, speakers, gaming shelves, and the underlying message, saying, And you have more than enough stuff. My pastimes were useless waste. Despite my best efforts to remain composed, my voice wavered with rage. You do understand that my father gave me that console. Even the money isn't the point, it's the idea. She laughed. Well, it's sentimental now. You never treat it like a holy heritage, as far as I can tell. It hurt. I was attached to it nostalgically. Yes. It was mine nevertheless, even if it was only material. We got into a heated disagreement. She said that because I didn't care about her sister's special day, I was selfish. I retorted that I was never contacted and that there were a lot of options, such as giving a smaller present or saving from her own wages. She gave a shrug. Then we appeared cheap. I won't let my sister down since she has high expectations. I was astounded by the haughtiness. It seems like her sister's demands overrode any sense of justice or boundaries. Unable to agree, she hurried off to get her thoughts straight while she was away. I made the decision to see whether she had secretly listed any additional things for sale. I checked my closet to make sure nothing else was gone, but I was still terrified. Who's to say she wouldn't attempt again if she could list my console once? I found out later that day that, although it was designated as on hold, the marketplace listing was still live. After our argument, she hadn't even removed it. That was the last straw. I emailed her to tell her to take it off right away. A sardonic "fine but appended" was her response. "I'll find another method to pay for the present if you're this petty." It was astounding how little regret there was. I began making plans in my head about how to manage the connection. I was still reeling in part. If she expressed regret or made reparations, could I still salvage this? But the more hours went by, the more I was certain that I couldn't trust her. She didn't apologize or give an explanation when she got home that evening. As if nothing had happened, she threw her keys on the counter. I asked her to see reason as I addressed her one final time. She locked herself in the bedroom after rolling her eyes and accusing me of not being a helpful spouse. My tolerance had worn thin by the next morning. I insisted that we speak clearly. With a loud sigh, she walked into the living room. "Can we just stop talking about that dumb console if it's about it again?" "I said," she said. I tightened my jaw. It was more than simply a console. It was about obvious entitlement and disdain. "I need clarity," I informed her. "Do you still believe that what you did was justified? Or are you sorry for it?" After a brief moment of hesitation, she stepped up her efforts. "If you had assisted me right away, I wouldn't have had to do that. The money is yours. You say you're interested in me. It's a big wedding for my sister. It would be unfair of me to arrive without anything." That made me unable to speak. In effect, she was holding me responsible for her deceitful strategy. My brain was spinning just from the sheer audacity. My breath came out sharply. If you can't see how incorrect that was, we're done. Someone who feels entitled to my possessions is not someone I can be with. She crossed her arms and sneered. "Really? You split up because of something as trivial as a game console?" I was infuriated by her contemptuous tone. "It is not a little one. You're insulting me, lying and stealing. Trust is destroyed by betrayals like this one." She began to curse, saying that I was interfering with her sister's wedding. The ridiculousness almost made me chuckle. She had imagined that the only way out was to sell my 5. I reiterated that she had no right to list it since it was my property. "I live here too," she shot back. "I'm entitled to take care of my family." That was it. The final remnant of my dream for reconciliation disappeared. I made it very clear to her that she had to pack her things. "I was overreacting," she said in an attempt to change the subject. She even made threats. "I'll tell everyone you're a jerk for not helping me out in a family situation if you throw me out." The objective. I wasn't going to allow her to use family or societal pressure to control me. I shot back, "So go ahead. Tell them the truth about your attempt to covertly sell my property to pay for a wedding present. I don't think you'll look nice." Anger flashed across her face, and I briefly believed she may attempt to physically resist my taking her belongings away. Rather, in a fit of rage, she rushed into the bedroom and began dragging clothing out of the wardrobe. "I'm heartless," she yelled. I was more interested in a console than in love. The irony was astounding. If she had been honest and asked, I wouldn't mind assisting if that were the case. As she packed, however, the covert listing sealed her doom. I overheard her whining that I was throwing her out without cause over the phone, most likely with her sister or a friend. I let her tell her story even if it makes my blood boil. I carefully stacked her belongings and grabbed a couple of boxes so she could depart as quickly as possible. Her passionate phone discussion in the other room was interspersed with the oppressive atmosphere in the flat. I nearly hesitated when she eventually came out with tears in her eyes. I had some grief when what I believed to be a love relationship ended. But my determination was strengthened by the thought of the buyer at the door. She made one final attempt to blame me. "In 2 weeks, my sister will get married. Is there somewhere I should stay?" I gave a shrug. "Not in this place. When you attempted to sell my possessions behind my back, you made that decision." She squinted. As she dragged her bag out the door, she spat, "You'll regret this." I remained silent. Watch her go. The ultimate severance was the resounding bang of the door in the hallway. I experienced heartbreak as well as relief. It was oddly silent in the apartment. The recollection of our violent altercations has tainted the once shared area. I turned on my S5 to make sure it was still mine. I felt a rush of appreciation for being home to stop the purchase. If not, I would have come back to my console after running errands. Lost. Half of its value was sold. The star of treachery. I prepared myself for drama over the following few days. As expected, I received calls from her family members and common friends who had heard a distorted version of what had happened. They inquired as to its veracity. Why was she sent out onto the streets? I told a true story quietly. She attempted to purchase a pricey wedding present by surreptitiously selling my console. A few friends were taken aback. I was chastised by others for not making concessions, but I remained unmoved. When it comes to someone taking your belongings, there is no room for compromise. One or two of my friends strongly encouraged me to maintain my position. After a while, her sister messaged me, "How come you would harm her just before my wedding? Were you unable to wait?" That irritated me. I sent a courteous but strong reply in response. Behind my back, she attempted to sell my property. The betrayal remains unchanged if you wait. I don't care about her anymore. After that, I blocked her. The sister's accusation was ridiculous since she didn't want any more complications, as if I were the issue because I didn't let them walk all over me. She hadn't really finished the deal, but I contemplated whether I should call the cops or something. So it was less of a completed transaction and more of an attempted steal. I had not damaged my console. Legally, it might be a difficult battle. I concluded that prosecuting charges over a transaction was not worth it. That never took place. She lost a solid living condition in a relationship due to her own manipulation and avarice, which was the true justice.